how's everyone doing tonight? It's an exercise. And it's an exercise not only for the talk, but it's also an exercise for us in our daily lives, so we can make a connection. As Alba mentioned, I'm going to try to connect with our reality. It's not an easy topic to talk about. And we're going to do some tough exercises, but hopefully it will make us think. It will make us think not only about the moment of discarnation or passing to the other side, but our action, which will lead us to a better discarnation and not to suffer as much on the other side. So, how are you today? Great. All right. So define great for me, Jeanette. Did you do something, or did you go through grateful? Okay, define grateful for me. Did something happen that makes you feel this way?
I feel like I have everything, although it's difficult, I'm kind of have a control of everything. And I'm accepting the things I cannot control. I'm accepting and working on it.
Okay, we can go home now. No, so she's saying that she's acceptable for the things that she cannot control, and she has everything that she needs, right? Mm-hmm. That it's the necessities. Anybody else? Make it short. For example, I had a tough conversation with my daughter today. Yes. And I did my duty as a father. It wasn't easy. But I had my duty. I had to have a conversation. Look, guys, life is not this, mundane. We have to do things. We have to get things done. That's part of life, and it's okay. It's part of the day. I'm not saying that I'm happy that I had a tough conversation, but we have to have these conversations. So not everything is happiness in the sense that we define happiness, but it's also our responsibilities, right? Or having the courage to get something done. So anyone else? Paula. Well, let me pass the microphone.
This is an A+ day because I call it Super Spiritual Saturday. I spent 2 hours with my meditation group this morning, and I'm here.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Anybody else? All that we're trying to do is to find out how are you today, and what leads you to say, I'm okay, hello, or just what has something in your day happened today that makes you feel good, or even say, I have a tough day, but it's part of life.
So today is the anniversary of my father's passing back to the spirit realm. Today marks 3 years. So I'm not sad. I'm very happy that he's in a good place. He's not suffering from what he was suffering from. And I don't want him to be sad. So I'm really grateful instead just of having had that type of father that I needed to grow and to just become the person that I am. And I'm just grateful actually for my parents and for the time that I had with them and that I had with my father before he passed. So I feel good about that I can say that now after 3 years. I'm okay. Yeah.
Great. That's a great example. By the way, I saw the picture that you posted. That was really nice. Why we're going through this? Why? Right. Huh? It's life. It's part of life, right? The topic tonight is suffering in the afterlife. If we're here now, it's because it's a combination of several events, right, that led us to believe or to make a choice or whatever we want to call, that tonight we will be at the SSB, and here we are. We got to put everything in perspective. Even our communication, body language, even spoken or not, leads us to be here. Because if the environment wasn't the best environment for us, guess what? We wouldn't be here. Because we may do things forced, once or twice, but then it gets tiring and it's like, no, this is not the place for me to be. So everything leads for us to be here tonight. There is a reason for. And this exercise is that what will the little events of life, of today, do for us in the transition as we study in the face of death last time, as well as in the other side? That's the reason we're going through this. And we need to think more about this, because it hit me when I started studying, this topic. Joanna de Angelis, she talks about the suffering, and we mentioned, I remember talking about the afterlife, here and there, but now it's like, it's so true, right? And we study. But when we really dive into it, it makes us think about it. So I would like to do one final exercise at the beginning now. With all the events that we just had today, in this event here, what if I were to tell you that we're not going home, we're going back to the spirit realm? And I want you to believe that. No, and I'm not joking. I know this is a little bit harsh. For some of us, like, oh, think about death. Oh, my Lord, yes. It is true, because this is the best place for us to think about it. And I had to tell myself, should I do this? Should I ask everyone to think about death? Because, after all, we come to the Spirit Center, to really liberate ourselves from the craziness. But guess what? Leaving the physical body is part of life. Just as Kirsten gladly mentioned her father, the passing of her father, right? So we're not going home. After this, after the prayer tonight, we're going someplace else. Where do you think you will be? Where? Think about your day today. Think about the difficulties that you're facing right now, because we're not free of them. Think about the thoughts that you had. Think about the decisions that you made, or the scapegoats that you used not to face the problems of our lives. We got to insert that in there too. Think about all these things. I'll give you some time. Seriously, really simmer this idea. Because from now on, as we'll see here with Joanna de Angelis, we know better. Or let's say, we will know better, right? So the things that we say, the things, or how we act, how we perceive one another, how we perceive ourselves, everything is leading us to a discarnation moment that in certain ways, we have control of it. Not a full control of it, because I'm not saying that after we read this tonight, or after we go through this talk tonight, or even if you read the whole book or all the books, that we're going to change overnight. A transition doesn't happen that way. But it's a start. It should be a point of light for all of us. So Joanna de Angelis starts this chapter by saying the following. In the light of Spiritism, the problem suffering takes on a dimension unknown by most philosophical and religious doctrine, in that Spiritism amplifies its area of study and discussion. Why is this? It's not that Spiritism knows it all and everybody else doesn't know anything. Because Spiritism is a science that deals with the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits and their relation with the corporeal world. So in other words, we're spirit. It studies our origin, where we came from, right? Our destinies, our nature, our origin, and our destinies as well. And our relation with the corporeal world. Whether we are incarnated like we are right now, in relation to the other spirits, or spirits with us. And we have to, as we study these elements tonight, as we remember mentioning to each one of you the last time we were here, we have to put ourselves as incarnate as well as discarnates, as if we're going through the suffering in the afterlife. Orthodox religions resolve the issue of divine justice through the application of eternal penalties and rewards. They establish the concept of never-ending punishment, engendering a form of heavenly vengeance in which love, compassion, benevolence, and justice itself are set aside and disregarded. According to the criterion, offenders have no right of rehabilitation, even when ignorant, psychopathic, or simply rebellious. They are condemned without remission if they die in sin. Severe at one moment, naive the next, the same approach applies to fear-filled persons who repent, and to shrewd persons who claim to be submitting to dogma or accepting Christ as their Savior, releasing them as if by magic from all suffering and blessing them with the everlasting happiness reserved for the righteous, and if unequal procedures merited equal qualification and reward. Why do we bring this whole thing? Because we need to snap out of this idea that we're doomed. If we didn't have a good day today, if we didn't respond to one another well today, that we have no right or no way to reconcile with ourselves, with others. On the other hand, we also have to think that's going to cost. If we make a mistake, right? Thank God we have the ability to recognize, sometimes a little bit late, but to recognize that I made a mistake. And you go through that moment, we will see a little bit more in depth what it is. And then you claim, you ask with that individual or others to repair, right? So it's important that we think that we wipe this idea of that we are doomed forever, right? Burning to the fire of, despair, right? Which was okay for us and Jesus and the other prophets for them to use the idea of the everlasting burning fire, right? If we go back to the heaven and hell, there's a beautiful explanation why that was used. It was an imposition of those at the time to refer that if we don't change our behavior, something's going to consume us. And what is this something? Guilt. Let's not read this. But what is guilt? What is guilt? No. Let's participate. After all, we're going to discarnate after this.
Oh, that got dark quick. It's the realization that you've done something wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
Realization that you have done something wrong. Anyone else? Remorse, okay.
That's correct, and I would add in beating yourself up for it.
Okay, beating yourself up for it. Okay, so whenever we do something that is against our moral or moral standards, or something that tells us that, this is the line, and you walk out of the line, right? And you look back and you say, I made a mistake. And you beat yourself for it, right? And you just, stay in that mode. But the cause is that you did something wrong. We do something wrong. We do something that is not according to what we think is correct or not. And I like to put it this way, because what I think it's wrong is completely different from what Paula thinks it's wrong. When I say completely different, we hopefully have the same standards, right, Paula? But it varies. There's a variation. And this helps us as well to look back and say, I'm not going to be so judgmental, because Leo, perhaps he made a mistake. He didn't know what he was doing. Or maybe his standards a little bit off. Maybe I need to help him. Right? So it's good for us to insert that in there as well. But guilt is what and she starts right then and there, that guilt takes us to a level of suffering after we discarnate that is unbelievably hard to fix it. Because it takes time, it takes energy, it costs. When I say cost, it costs a lot of movement, right? Well, let's take on the physical aspect. When you have to do a change at your home, let's say you want to change the furniture in your home. It costs, doesn't it? It costs money, it costs time. Just the time for you to pick something. And if you have to add or discuss the ideas that you have with your partner or someone else, guess what? It's the madhouse. But I like blue. No, but I like pink. I like this. I like that. It takes time. Imagine when you have to fix a whole life experience on something that happened in the past that you could have made a good decision, but we don't. And I'm not saying decisions that we have to make on things that we don't know, that we're still learning. That is okay. I'm talking about things that we know We receive the teachings, but we still keep doing the same mistakes. So she goes over and says, guilt marks the conscience like an open wound until a wrong is righted and the damaged energy field is recomposed. Sincere repentance or honest promises to change are not enough to rebalance the psyche and the emotions of offenders. Therefore, the more enlightened and lucid the transgressor, the greater his or her responsibility. So if we know that we're not supposed to do A or B or C, and we do it, and we have seen through other examples, our responsibility will be higher. It will be greater. Our guilt, perhaps, not in the now, because when we are entangled with all the craziness, sometimes we don't see it. But when we realize and we snap out of it, which sometimes it happens on the other side, guilt really burns. There is a passage of, and I was reading at the beginning, trying to look for it, of this book, Nosso Lar, when André Luiz is describing what had happened to him during the life that he had, a very easy life, not blaming his parents. He even mentions his parents of giving him the best life ever, a very easy life, going and become a doctor and everything. And after all that happened, the way he misused all the energy that was given to him, he went back crippled. And that's the word that he uses, crippled, to the spirit realm, back to the spirit realm. So it's like you get all the energy, you reincarnate, you go through all the preparation, you arrive here, have a good family, and then you go back in debt. With yourself mainly. With yourself mainly. Because once you realize this thing and this guilt is burning inside of you, inside of us, we're debting with ourselves. And the time that it will take to recuperate, as we saw with André Luiz as well, and many others, and the energy, the rehabilitation also of others that he had harmed, and the examples that we get as well, all the harms that was created by his family, it's amazing. We have to think about that. It's not, again, that, oh, somebody is punishing me now, but his conscience, right? Wrongs hold their authors in their own web, which they must unmake by correcting what they did. This endeavor provides dignity and advances them. Released from their wrongs, they gain experience and progress down the road in the direction of new levels of happiness, no longer held back by their past. Not even their victims' forgiveness grants wrongdoers release from a guilty conscience. Of course, it does help offenders feel better about themselves and those they have harmed, which encourages them to repair the damage. Through love and not hatred in the form of retaliation, the victory of moral recovery becomes more feasible, thereby delivering them from suffering. So, if I do something to, I don't know, Professor, I don't know. I'm afraid to. To Yasko, okay. To Yasko. And she forgives me. Guess what? That's not the whole thing. That's part of it. And it's going to count quite a bit for my rehabilitation. But it's not everything. Even with her forgiveness, I may go down this road of guilt, because it's about me with myself now. She will move on. She will continue with her life. She will utilize the situation as an example so she doesn't fall in the same pit. But it's not everything for me. I need what? What are the three elements that we learn, again, through the heaven and hell in chapter 7? Repentance, expiation, and reparation are the three conditions necessary for the effacing of a fault and the suppression of its consequences. Repentance may begin in the spirit life or in the life of the flesh, and at any period, if a spirit's repentance is starting, he suffers for a longer time. Expiation, the second one, consists in the sufferings both physical and moral, that are the results of spirit's wrongdoing, whether in the course of the same earthly life in which he has done wrong, or in the phase of spirit life succeeding it, or in a new earthly life until all traces of his wrongdoing have been effaced. Stop right here. One thing that we learn through this passage, just this, the first one, or even when we go to the second, is that it may happen here, or it may take a long time into the next life. When I say the next life, is not through the moment that we are in the spirit realm, but even in the next life. Kirsten gave some examples last week. Why do we have certain fears? Certain conditions that we have with us, it's like, I don't like to deal with this. We know deep inside of us that we have to face it, right? But we'll push aside. And I know everyone have our limitations. But certain things in our lives that we don't like to go there. Why? Perhaps it's not the time. I'm not saying that you should go and do brave things, but really analyze ourselves. Why do I feel this way about this person? Why do I feel this way about this situation? Why do I feel this way about myself? Maybe something from the past. We don't know. We have to work on it. But reparation, the third one, consists in doing good to those whom we have wronged. He who, through lack of power or of will, does not make reparation in a given life for the wrong he has done in that life, will be brought again in a new earthly life into contact with the parties he has wronged in their former life, and under conditions which he will himself have chosen beforehand, and which will have been contrived in such a way as to give him the opportunity of proving his devotion to them, and of enabling him to do them as much good as they formerly did them harm. It's quite a bit. But why postpone this? Why wait until the next life? Why wait until we discarnate to get to this point? And if anything, that is the reason why we're here tonight. So we don't suffer on the other side. So that we don't have to look at a chart again, right? In the reincarnation plan and say, oh gosh, I have to face that again. Let's do it now. Ask for help now. Say, I made a mistake. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. Because sometimes it's not the act of acting, it's the lack thereof. That we don't act. And sometimes that hurts even more when we do something wrong. Because when you do something wrong, you were courageous. You did it. You applied yourself. But when you don't do it, you're like, oh man, I missed the boat. I should have been there a little bit earlier, right? So we got to think about that as well. Charity, the lack of charity sometimes can be us, waiting. I'll wait for tomorrow. Maybe too late. So we have to think about that. So remember these three things: repentance, expiation, and reparation. Nothing is easy. It's not just as we saw that we have shown that now I claim ask for forgiveness. I look at the cross, or I do A or B or C, and that's it. I'm saved. We have to repair. Joanna de Angelis then continues. Harbor while they are in the body, selfishness, the illusion of ownership, and the presence of the primitive passions transfer the wounds they have caused into the afterlife. Since humans are spirits, and the spirit is energy, their wrongs stay with them, producing maddening ulcerations wherever their spirit is, whether in the body or outside of it. Death does not actually change anyone. It only changes individuals, position, and vibratory situation, keeping them as they are. Go back to Nosso Lar, because that's very vivid example, because I like to use it because we have the movie and we see and thank God it was brought to us the position of André Luiz in the lower zones, right? When he was hearing other spirits calling him what? Suicide. And I'm not a suicide. I didn't kill myself. Well, not directly. But the examples of life that he went through, much like we did our exercise today, why we feel good, why we feel bad, right? What brought us here led him to that position. When he was looking and saying, I'm not a suicide. But then after some enlightenment, he saw that it was not the fact that he took any some kind of poisonous substance or anything like that. Well, he had the issue with the drinking, but other things that led him to that position. And we can analyze our lives and do the same assessment. What have I been doing, thinking, feeling, that perhaps will lead me to a better transition? A situation in the afterlife where I'm not going to have to look at myself and say, I made this, I could have done that, or whatnot. Because as Joanna de Angelis is saying, it doesn't change anything. So if we were to discarnate right now, as we were joking and doing the exercise, nothing is going to change. It's going to be the same. The same feelings that we have right now, we will have. Perhaps worse, because we're going to take that and say, oh gosh, I forgot to do this. I forgot to do that. Right? I wanted to get this done. We were talking about riches right before our talk tonight. I wish I could have gotten that life, right? And we're blaming others. That's our position. And nothing will change. Even more, the things that we have to repair, nobody will repair for us. You can leave everything behind, pay for this, do that, and all. But the things that you have to repair, if you made any mess, you will have to come back and clean the mess. It is natural that the change of clothes brought about by the end of the biological experience does not extract the energy stratification located in the seat of the conscience. Discarnates awaken beyond the molecular vibrations of the body with the same skills, anxieties, illusions, and cultivated necessities, whether good or bad, and assume a posture equivalent to the degree of their evolution. It's interesting that, she talks about the skills, right? But also the anxieties, the illusions, and the cultivated necessities that we have cultivated in life. So everything that we have gathered thus far, it's going to stay. Which in some way, they're good, right? No wonder we have also capabilities, abilities different than others. And that's something that we have to take into account. We bring with us different ways to see life, different ways to examine certain things in life that perhaps for me is very hard, but for Sarah, she looks at it and says, oh, no brainer, right? Why is that? Well, this is the baggage that she brought with her. As Kirsten said, I don't like to say baggage, but yeah, the luggage, right? The nice backpack that we have with all the good stuff that we have in it. The sensations predominant in their individuality remain when they are backward, sensual, pleasure-loving, and connected to sinister, licentious, and selfish thoughts. They experience the same vibratory density that they were accustomed to while in the physical body. They rematerialize themselves and continue to live as if they were still incarnated in the somatic body, suffering all its limitations, situations, conditions, infirmities, and wear. The mind, slave to sensations, creates ideoplastic forms that baffle them and make them despondent, making their suffering hard to describe. It is as if we are still in the flesh. Through our perispirit, our minds are so strong, and I'm talking about the brain. I'm not talking about the physical brain. Our minds are so strong, and we doubt ourselves in the difficulties of life, right? But our minds are so strong that we create an environment, and we manipulate the environment in such a way that we create walls, that create like our houses and everything. That's how nosso lar is created. The manipulation, the same way we manipulate iron here, right? We sew things, we put things together, we put clothes together. That's a manipulation of the universal cosmic fluid. in a very rough way, but it is. But we can do the same thing with our minds. And this is how they live. And one of the things that we're not bringing here that Joanna de Angelis bring to us is that what we do next, we try to contact our loved ones or those whom we did not leave our situation so well. And it gets worse because then we start battling with ourselves and with others because they cannot connect with us. Not everyone is an ostensible medium. Thank God, right? That they can see us and say, hey, Leo, welcome back. No, it doesn't happen that way. But what do we feel? Discomfort. So when they feel that we are in a discomfort, talking about if we were to have a spirit approach us that is not in a good, because if they're contacting us and they're afflicted, their affliction will change our vibratory system, right? Environment. How do you think we will feel or we will respond? In a negative way. So it creates this madness between us that discarnate or us when we discarnate with others, and we start creating this hell-like environment, much like, again, André Luiz found himself in the afterlife. Just to exemplify. It can be worse. It can be better. I'm not saying that this is for all of us or this is what's going to happen to each one of us. It's just an alert because there are also, I'm quite sure, there are also conditions when individuals, they discarnate, they live life well. I'm not saying that they're perfect, but they live life well where they will discarnate, they will feel sad. They will feel that, you know what, I could have done more, or I dropped the ball a couple of times, but I'm okay. Taking back to what Kirsten was saying, I'm okay to say this now, right? I'm okay to analyze and say, I will do better next time. And that is a great step, by the way. When we recognize our mistakes and we say, I will do better next time. If we can do this with our lives now, that's a huge jump. Because we will look at it and say, yes, I say something harsh. I'm sorry. I'll try to do better next time. So things doesn't have to be this way. Love is the great law of life. Love establishes the criterion of justice with equality for all, as per the law of action and reaction. The mental and moral conduct individuals cultivated while incarnated yields corresponding results, imbuing them with habits that translate into experiences of liberation or restraint, depending on their quality. So, action and reaction. It's not that I'm being punished, but what I throw in the environment, it will come back to me. It will create such a wave that will come back to me. I don't know if you've ever seen analysis of sound, for example, where how sounds travel and hit something or sound waves and how that works. I think it's beautiful because it's the same thing. It's the same. It's a great way for us to explain as well how our thoughts, our feelings travels as well. It's the same way. It hits a wall and creates that wave back, right? Because everybody now is contaminating. Everybody now is responding to it as we learn with thought and life as well. But it's a great way for see it. So if you see it in the future, remember, oh, that's it. If I think, it's going to reverberate back to me. Breaking news. The continuation of life after physical death entails the same characteristics, the fixations resulting in future behavior criteria. Because the addicted mind generates needs that cannot be satisfied there, suffering is constant for those who deceive themselves or harm others. When called to undergo purifying suffering, those imprisoned in ignorance about the laws of life often yield to rebelliousness and suicide to escape the coming harvest. And it's interesting how Joanna de Angelis starts going in bringing up a more difficult and cruel reality when we even dive into the idea of taking our lives directly and indirectly. Directly and indirectly. If we were to give, since we were studying the beautiful passage of the Gospel according to Spiritism, if we were to give or let somebody use your car, the least that you would expect is that person to bring the car back in the same condition, right? If the person, takes the car and puts some gas and cleans the car, why not? It would be even better. If you lend someone money, what do you expect? To receive at least the same amount back. Banks, they act in a different way. If they lend you money, they want some kind of money back for the help that they give you. And in a way, that's how economy evolves, right? We do things. But when we have and we give, what do we expect? At least that the person will utilize the energy that you allow the other person to have in a good way. Now, I changed a little bit the concept of just giving. It's not that we want, but at least we think, hopefully, well, with this wealth that I'm sharing with them. And I'm not talking about money only. I'm talking about time, consideration, right? Or just listening to the person. Hopefully this will be a utilized time or something that it's going to change dramatically. But what I think, if I give more emphasis to life, good things, good readings, boycotting, movies that talks about destruction that is irrelevant. We know destruction for changes, right, is necessary. However, unnecessary destruction just leads us to madness. By doing positive things, we will exalt life more than we are exalting now the seizing of our body. In other cases, some seek to escape degenerative diseases through euthanasia with the naive idea of eternal sleep where everything speaks of life, activity, progress. It's, again, the escapes that we have in life. That's why I included at the beginning the actions that we decide to put aside. It's a form of euthanasia as well. Oh, no, let's just put aside. I don't want to deal with this right now. Deal with it. Tomorrow will be a different day, right? But we entered this idea of, oh, you know what, just a little bit more, just a little bit more. It may be too late. To give a continuation, the illusion that individuals allow themselves conceptualizing life as a biological accident is largely responsible for the absurdities that cause them pain and suffering. Only self-awareness and true individualization foster a healthy life on the earth and then beyond it, when the phenomenon of death occurs as a natural end to the biological cycle. I want to stop right here. And I brought this picture of someone not only analyzing who we are in the mirror, but touching ourselves in the mirror. It's a different meaning. This idea of individualization. The worst thing that can happen to us is for us to lose who we are, our individuality. Have we asked ourselves, who are we? We have done here, I know that, but intimately, have we asked ourselves, who are we? Who am I? And we can kind of stop ourselves or limit ourselves into the idea that, yes, I'm Leonardo Vieira, I'm so-and-so age, and I'm this and that in my life, but we stop right there. What has brought me here to be this individual today? How am I feeling? Right? What are my thoughts? And now let's project ourselves in the future. What will all of this, in conjunction with what's happening right now, put me in the future? Where will I be? With the other individuals as well, what's going to happen to us? Because then you change just the I, and you think about others too, because that's important. Because a great part of who I am has to do with the people around me. No wonder my wife likes to tell me that you're just like your father, you're just like your mother. It's okay. At times we, we're like, yeah, wow, I need to change. I don't want to do the same mistakes. But at the same time, it's okay. hopefully the good things that they taught us, our parents, we're using in a good way. Even the negative things, we should be grateful and say, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do a little bit different. And forgive me if they're not going to like it, because they had their chance. It worked a little bit, but, we can do different now. So it's okay. It's not all bad. But we need to have this idea or this reconnection with who we are, our individuality. We cannot lose who we are, because it is on these moments that we allow negative things to come in and we get lost. And when it's time for us to reanalyze, it may be kind of late, and it will take a little bit more of work too. Since beyond the cadaverous disjunction, individuals continue to be conscious of themselves. It is natural that their dominant sensations and emotions continue to affect them. In fact, those that were either a blessing or discord predominate even more vigorously with the continuation of life though in another dimension. In this panorama, the coarse sensations from which they did not want to be released or could not be released become even stronger, generating corresponding suffering as if they were still in the physical realm. Again, it's a continuation of who we are. She is. This is, thank you, Yaski. Yaski's like, she's so graphic. That is why, I alert everyone. And I'll alert everyone again. We're talking about plenitude. And we're, analyzing the negative. Because if we don't face it, if we don't know who we are, no wonder let me finish. If we don't face who we are, how are we going to get to plenitude? She starts in the book with what? The Buddhist ideals, right? Which is what? Know thyself. Let's get to know ourselves. One of the things that I've been learning as well with Buddhism is the analysis of who we are, where we are, what we're doing, what we're thinking. It's very difficult. It's truly difficult. If I were to tell you right now to keep repeating yourself, I'm paying attention to the talk, I'm paying attention to the talk, I'm paying attention to the talk, it's extremely hard. I have tried a couple times, I'm not going to lie, and I failed several times in the idea of analyzing what I'm doing. Now, it gets to a point that gets better. I'll kid you not. That you start being in the moment, but it takes a lot of effort, where you know what you're doing and you're paying attention, and you close everything around you. We need to do more work like that, Paula, in the future. But no wonder she brings the light of Buddhism, because they are amazing for it. They are amazing for it. In the area of the sentiments, as is understandable, cultivated fantasies and the imbalance of fully generated resentment, which is supplemented by complexes resulting from a guilty conscience on account of past wrongs, as well as everything positive they could have done but did not do. A guilty conscience engenders mechanism of repair that turn into nightmares of unnecessary repentance that act like a whip inflicting punishment. And this is what we do to ourselves, right? As Paula said, we keep adding to it more and more, and then someone else, says something or that is against our will or that doesn't help at all, it makes it even worse. The environment, when we are already in this guilty conscience, sometimes can only make it worse. And most of the time, because unfortunately we are vibrating negatively, so it only adds to it. Repentance must be awakening to responsibility, which calls for reconstruction, renewal and reparative action without distress or misery. I usually like to joke at work. People, say, man, you've been doing this, been doing that, it's stressful. And I know, but why complain? The energy that I'm going to utilize to complain, I can use for something else because you can't change it, right? Just keep going. Use to reconstruct the environment or to save yourself from the same crazy trip in the future. Do something different. Maybe we're doing something wrong that I had to go through that, or we have to go through that. Use the energy for something more appropriately. Suffering in the afterlife also results in shocking conditions when, due to post-death perturbation, discarnates surrender to the ideoplasties of everyday life and physically construct for themselves an environment and a reality that promote the continuance of the organic state with all its problems through now in a different situation, prolonging the carnal illusion with all its perturbing ingredients, which are the result of the attachment to matter, from which death has not actually freed them. It's a continuation of it, and we can keep saying over and over and over. This is the end. Yes, we'll get to it come in a second. This is the end. But everybody's quiet. Everybody's like, oh my God, so descriptive, right? Yasko. Did anything that we read or we talked about change so we can go back to our homes and not discarnate? I want you really to think about all of this new idea. It's very simple. I know it's a lot of reading. You have access to the book. For those who speak Portuguese, you can actually get the PDF online very easily and read it for yourself. But I would like to ask you, will this change your perception about life? Because death is inevitably. We will have to go through it. The physical body will decay. We're not going to be, super duper, individuals for the rest of our lives, right? We will go through losses as well, as far as losing one another, which is very hard. And guess what? It's going to happen to us. Now, let us think, with all these alertness that we had here today, will it change on how we act? Because the change has to happen now. We are proposing a change on how we are on the other side, how we get to the other side. But we have to really analyze our lives now. That's why when we ask someone, how are you today? We should ask ourselves, how am I feeling today as well? And if we ask, we ought to be open to receive a whole long explanations, even though I kind of like the American version of how are you? Okay, I'm fine. But deep down inside, we're not fine. But we just say it as a way to say hello, right? Now, Latin cultures, I can't speak for others. If you say, how are you? Forget it. You're in it for a long conversation, Fun at times, because it's like, wow. Because you can learn, right? But at times it's like, why have I asked? Why have I asked? So we really have to think about these things. So when people ask, how are you? Really think. Because these are the small things or the great things that will lead us to a better discarnation and to a transition on the other side for us to look back and say, you know what? It's tough. This is me now thinking it's tough because there are things that perhaps I didn't do or that I missed, but I'm going to try it. And if we can get to that point, or even better, saying I did a whole lot, then it's it. And with all of our accomplishments thus far, I mean, it doesn't, putting aside titles, putting aside the things that we think that society imposes on us as thought that we should be rich, we should have a beautiful house, we should have a beautiful family, or even a functional family, right? The father, the mother, a beautiful marriage. Okay, it's great for some individuals, but not for everybody. I'm not perfect yet, right? Because sometimes when we say these things to have a good life, we allow ourselves to, to dive into this idea of a beautiful life being what society is imposing on us right now, right? Where different parts of the world that Has nothing to do with what we're thinking, right? So to finalize, what Joanna de Angelis tells us is that release from material conditionings is essential. Disciplining the mind and the will in order to adapt immediately to the life beyond life. That is the only way suffering can be avoided, especially if the physical existence was characterized by ignoble actions, having achieved the main purpose of reincarnation, the pursuit of happiness. An individual's moral and spiritual education is the sure means of deliverance from suffering on the earth, as well as beyond the grave, fostering a life abounding in peace. So, a lot of food for thought. I'm sorry if I scared you. Everybody will go home. Nobody will discarnate. Right? Hopefully not tonight, because if something happens, I'll be in serious trouble. Yes, I'll be participating in the mediumistic meeting in a different level. But it's really for us to think. It's really for us to analyze. Kirsten, I know you wanted to say something. I would like to open up for comments and questions.
Could you go back to the previous slide? That's what I wanted to comment on. So when Joanna talks about the last paragraph, suffering in the afterlife, and could you go back to the previous slide too? I think it's more pertinent even to the previous slide. Yeah. When you were reading this and when you were discussing it, what came to my mind was the book Memoirs of a Suicide, and they talk in depth about how majority of most suicides, when they go to the other side, they actually build around them, whatever way they took their life. So, for instance, Camilo in the book describes people that had hanged themselves, and that they're in the middle of this dark abyss, and it's just, that. Or if someone had gone into the water, there was in the middle of nowhere just water. So he was detailing this whole view, and it was really amazing. He was talking about how the mind is so powerful. We don't even realize how powerful our mind is. It just made me think of that. So yeah, that's it.
It is true, and I'm glad that you brought this, because it also crossed my mind. But Memoirs of Suicide, I think we were so crying if we were to bring the examples, because it's extremely descriptive and it's very harsh. Now, we can take the example that you brought, the energy, and remind ourselves and say, if we can do that in a negative way, we can do the same thing in a positive way. If we can reconstruct our own suffering over and over and over, because that's how it happens. They keep doing over and over and seeing the same thing over and over. And like we have seen movies, right? And it's interesting how movies, they depict these craziness that go on in our minds very well. But it keeps happening over and over, and they go through the suffering until something, a shock, either from the material environment, us, right, connecting with that spirit, with that mind, allows them to be taken away and be rescued. Not necessarily that they will be saved or they will change overnight. They will still feel all the suffering. However, they're not in that situation anymore. And they're called to do what? To reincarnate and to repair, right? But before the reparation, there is what? That suffering that we have to go through, the analysis of what had happened, and it's not pleasant. So, great example, Kirsten. Thank you.
Sorry to hijack. Can I ask one more
Okay.
question? Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
That sentence that she said about the individuation, when she says that
Yes.
only self-awareness and true individuation foster a healthy life on earth, and then beyond it. My question is, do you think she's talking about the need not only to be self-aware, but to become really my own true self, an individual, like apart from someone else and not dependent, because we have a lot of codependency going on in the world. So do you think that's what she's referring to in that particular sentence and a half?
It is, and I'm glad that you bring this, because I think it was, I can't remember the reason why I was thinking about it, but I think it was Thursday. that I started thinking about that. Right? How much of me is of a product of everybody else? Have we thought about it? How much of my feelings, my thoughts, the way I even walk is of myself, of others? And is that a good collection of things, or am I utilizing that collection of ideas, thoughts, in a positive way? Right? All of these things we have to think about it. But it is true, Kirsten. I think that we should choose through our individuality to say, this is good for me. This much is good for me. I remember a discussion of can't remember her name now. I do apologize. And I'll try to look for it. Dr. I forget what her name was now. And it has to do with the ability to be culturally sensitive, the ability to go into other country and you analyze the much of who you are, what you can give up of who you are, right? And the things that you cannot give up at all. And she uses the example of going to countries as, that you're required to wear, certain covering your faces and all those things. And she started analyzing on how she was debating on this whole thing. And she said, I'm not going to wear it. I mean, this is really harsh that they were making me wear this thing. But then she saw, wait a minute, is this going to make me a lesser individual or a better individual? And it's really interesting how she puts it. And she said, no. So who am I fighting? What am I fighting? Right? So she was able to kind of find the middle ground on the whole discussion with herself in the idea of being culturally sensitive. And it's the same thing with us. When we look at the world and say, this is me, this is not me, as well as, and I think this is important, Kirsten, to your question, is that when there is an imposition on what we're supposed to be, and we really don't have to be of other people want us to be. There is an invitation for us to be better individual. I think that we should acknowledge this with culture, with family, with the country where we live, right? But when that is an imposition, so much so that makes us lose ourselves, then we have to put a stop to it. Then we have to say, this is not for me. One final thing before we give it to Paula or Yas, because they were saying, we were analyzing a project, and one of the things that we were at work, and one of the things that we were supposed to propose on the project was the things that will be delivered with the project, right? When you're presenting the project with for the owner of the project or the person who wants the project done or the group of people. But it's also important for us to show within the project what will not be delivered. In other words, draw a line. Draw a boundary. And I was thinking, do we do that with ourselves? Do we do that with our relationships? Number one, we are afraid to say so because we're going to, hurt the person's feeling. Or sometimes we want to be buddies of everybody else. But once we do that, guess what? You're preventing yourself from hardships in the future. That you're saying, this is my boundary. This is what I will not deliver in this relationship. Do you see what I'm saying? And you allow the other person to do the same thing. Because relationships, after all, they're what? They're projects of life. Again, projects of life. It's forever. So if we take this in consideration in our lives, and we connect with of what I can be, the good that you can bring with me. I'm not, saying this in an egotistic way. The bring that you can bring to my life, and I'll bring the good that I can bring to your life. We're going to grow. But there are certain things that I cannot change. So I think it's important that you bring this question, Kirsten, to really help us analyze the environment and who we are and how we can become better individuals.
Thank you for this discussion. I think it's really important, and we realize we usually don't get to this kind of talking. I have a very quick question, but more so I'd like to go back to the beginning when you talked about what the general Christian believes happens after death. That's it right there, I think. Yeah, but the quick question is, under reparation, let's say the person I harmed is further evolved than I am, so they don't need to come back here. Who do I repair with my next lifetime?
Great question. With someone that is similar
In vibration?
in vibration pattern that you were with that individual who have already ascended. There is a chapter, and Kirsten maybe maybe can help me remember the chapter on action and reaction. Same thing happened to an individual in his family. He got stuck on his ways. And guess what? The family forgave him. Everybody went to a better condition. And that was the question. If not, Andrea Luis, Hilario, I think. I can't remember who asked. Anyways, it doesn't matter at this point. But I'll try to remember, try to bring the chapter to you at a later time. But it was explained that the same thing, because of the vibratory field of that individual, he will connect with a situation similar, not the same, similar, that he needs to rescue. Because we are, and this is, I think this is the justice of God as well, we are able to evolve. We shouldn't stay stuck with others. Now, it's beautiful when we allow ourselves and we ask ourselves to go back and rescue who is not there yet, i.e. Andrea Luis' mother, and other individuals, they do this in a way to help and ascend as well. But we don't have to be stuck. So great question.
With the Orthodox religions, because we're getting close to Thanksgiving, or I just spent time with relatives, who are more of this type of thinking, there's really not much we can share in the concept that we believe in, which is really similar to Buddhism and some other faiths, that there is a continuing evolution, and that when you go to the next dimension, you are yourself with whatever you've accumulated.
Yes.
Is there anything in the Spiritist case studies that talk about the more orthodox and how they evolve? Because they really are believing in a heaven or a hell. And then when they pass on, if that's their predominant thought form, then I would guess they're in some kind of heaven. And then there's still an evolutionary part that will happen at some point.
That's a question that many of us Spiritists can answer, but still a doubt inside of us, right? When I say doubt, is that not that we doubt, but it's like, really, this is really interesting. It becomes interesting to talk about. The same way that we can construct the hells, as Kirsten, remind us, on how someone takes their life, whichever way that they kind of reconstruct that environment and they relived over and over and over and over. It's the same thing with these beliefs, right? I resort back again. One of the things that remind me really well of it, again, the book Action Reaction, when in the chambers, the prayer chambers that they have in Mansão Paz, Andrea Luis is analyzing people praying. And the area, the capella, whatever you want to call, it's empty. However, their faith, their beliefs, create the altars. If you are whatever religion, you're praying for Buddha, you're praying for this, you're praying for that, that's what it would appear in front of them. So it is real. Our minds is very powerful. And this is what we create. We create these heavens. We create the hells that we, for over and over different reincarnations, we have been told and we believed so. So this is how it happens. Now, your other question, I think that there's not much to do. What can we do and how can we connect with these other individuals with what they believe, and trying to be just to them on being a good person. Because at the end of the day, some of these individuals, they're in a much better position than spiritists. Because again, we know better and we're still doing the wrong things. Some of these individuals, because of the fear that they have of going to hell, which is until now necessary, they don't do it. And you may ask, oh, because of fear they're not doing. But still a step ahead of many of us. Much like when, like we said, the prophets used the idea of the burning hell. Christ, used the idea of burning hell. Guess what? It was necessary for that time. And it's still necessary in certain situations for us. The fear that we have nowadays is different, right? Because we don't want to go to Umbral, André Luiz. But the fear that they had to be, that was in a way imposed, or we should say imposed, then it was different. It was necessary. So, Yasko.
I think I like that sentence that you put it there, that we are not a biological accident. Because we've been thinking, or many of us thought about that, we making those absurdities, like she says. So in the beginning of your talk, you ask, how about if we are aware that we're going to die tonight? What will be our our assessment? I think we should, in a very healthy way, not in this assessment every night, at least, before we go to bed, make an assessment, and especially how grateful we should be with all the goods that we received, including the capacity to think, the capacity to learn, the body, and also, this hope that next day we're going to have a sun rising next day. So, but this is not taught in the school. I was listening to a talk between Dalai Lama. He received Deepak Chopra and his friends in his home in India. So there was a answering question, and he said clearly, unfortunately, in our educational system, even in India, he said, he looked at Deepak Chopra and said, it's not as we learned thousands of years ago. We also are failing. He said, we have to really put in the educational system that we are not this biological accident of one life. We are part of a plan, long many incarnations to here. And we should, in 21st century, he said, there is no room anymore for wars. To use, I'm a biological accident, I'm born with this powerful, body, powerful situation, powerful family, I can do whatever I want. And smash those that by biological accident that is poor, weak, in a socially, limited situation. We should start to go to our essence and teach the children, since they are children. He said, we teach physical hygiene, he says, but not the moral hygiene. How to be compassionate, and in case someone harm you, how you should react, not with war. Teach how to have a dialogue since you are a kid. But this has to be in the educational system. That's what is. So I think it starts with this wrong concept that we are a biological accident with luck or, bad luck.
It is definitely a good, let's say, point of life that is not well discussed, not very well taught and relived because it's very, if we see the goodness going around, in most cases, very superficial. And that's why I like to see everybody here, because we keep coming back and over to reinforce good and positive ideas, right? It's not that this is a bad thing when we come to a talk like this, or we go to anywhere, or we sit down to have a meal together, but it's to reinforce the good things of life, the good necessities of life, right? This past 2 weeks ago, I came across one of the dharmas that we learned, through Hinduism, and it's all well taught with the Sikhs, and also the Jainism as well. The dharma of ahimsa, non-violence. And I was like, okay, non-violence. But then one of the individuals who were discussing that I came across, he was saying that ahimsa is more important than love. And I'm like, wait a minute. How can it be more important than love? And he explains, if you tell somebody, I love you, and you don't deliver the love, that's violence. And I was like, wow. Powerful, right? I mean, it's true. Because if you promise something, guess what? The other side will be expecting. And the act of non-violence, it is also in the things that you're supposed to do. Or the act of violence is also in the actions that you're supposed to deliver and you don't deliver. An expectance of something also that you don't deliver is also violence. So I was really interested in the whole thing. Obviously, I read more, and I can send you the video as well of this idea, and me diving into Buddhism, Hinduism, and all the different religions, as Joanna de Angelis in this book allows or invites us to do. But it is true that we don't do that much. And it doesn't take the SSB for us to do this. It doesn't take books for us to do this. But for us to go back at the beginning of the day and ask ourselves, how am I feeling today? And why? Ask yourself, why? Why I don't feel good? And it's okay to say, I don't feel God, I don't feel good. What's happening? What do I need? What will make my life better? Material things, certain situations in life. And then you go after what you want. You delineate a pattern or a path or a construct some kind of goal that you have to put forth, and then go after it. Ask for help. Say, look, I can't do it without your help. I need your help. That's why we live in family. So this is the idea, for us to really get up and say, how am I feeling today? That doesn't mean that we're going to stop from doing the things that we're supposed to do, go to work or, help one another, be the mother, the father, whatever it is. But as you're doing so, you ask, is this helping with my happiness? Not in an egotistic way, but in a way that will allow us to grow. And guess what? As other people see that happening, they will do the same. Unconsciously, you are promoting the same idea towards others. I want to be a better individual. And by being a better individual, it will help others. So that's the idea that we would like to leave you for tonight. I know we have a full house tonight. So what we'd like to do is to invite everyone for a visualization. Next month, right at the beginning of the month, we will deliver the release from suffering. Very short. But what we would like to propose is some ideas. I already brought some highlights here with the idea of nonviolence, but mainly with Jesus. As we're getting towards the end of the year, talk about Jesus, really connect with the true meaning of what Christmas is, and finalize this beautiful book, this beautiful work that without you guys, the presence of each one of us here, and those on the internet as well, we wouldn't have done it, right? Again, it becomes a purpose, right? Not just for me to read the book, but also to share with one another, to share these good thoughts that Joanna de Angelis brings to us. alarming sometimes, most of the time, because it's an intense book, but really helpful. So I would like to ask Marcelo to turn off the light, and I'll ask Daniel to put music on.